Yeah, good morning and welcome. It is 1 minute gone past the hour of 9 o'clock in the studios of Classic and across the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. Good morning and welcome back. Welcome to The Point for today, the 21st day of the month of October. And welcome back to our viewers, those of you on television, Channel 7, Channel 11, and Channel 20. You're probably on Facebook or via YouTube, or you're probably chiming in via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. It's the 21st day of October, and it is for many just another day on the calendar. It's for others a red letter day or moment. It's a period in time, pain and tragedy, and the dark history and the moments of this country we've lived through. It is what it is. It is our history. And as we move on 38 years later, the question is, can we heal? Have we healed? How can we heal? Have we dealt with the emotions and the scars? And to speak to us, we want to really have an active conversation this morning. And before I introduce my guest, I want, for the purpose of the general public, today's exercise is not intended to cast aspersions. We're not here to try to determine what may or may not have happened. We're not here to discuss a lot of the dark areas. The question is, we all went through this period in time. How can we heal? Have we healed? Is it possible that we can find a way to deal with it? My guest this morning is not a stranger to any one of us on the GBN network. Is my dear friend who he moves like the wind. Today he's here, tomorrow he's somewhere else, but today he's inside of beautiful Miami. Good morning, Dr. Panchu. How are you?
Good morning, Joseph. I am doing beautiful. I'm doing really well. The sun is out. It's a nice sunny morning, and I am enjoying the beauty of the environment.
Well, I know while you're happy to be where you are, there's no place sweeter than home, though.
Absolutely. Give it a couple days and I'll be back home.
Right back where you belong. Doc, this morning we're gonna get into a very what can be determined as a sensitive conversation. Maybe there are those who've blocked it, but our history, we go through highs and lows in life. The good, the bad, the indifferent experiences, but there's no doubt whatever the experiences are, it helps to shape who we are. The question is, while we all go through the experiences together, each and every one of us, we come out on the other end of it differently because we process things differently, we assimilate it differently. Some of us, we're able to cope. The events of 38 years ago, Doc, it is a moment in history that would never be forgotten. And while we try to sometimes ignore the realities of it, it is there forever to be remembered. Healing is what we want to do. Allow me, Doc, 38 years on, would it be reasonable to say that there are persons who, for whatever reason, they still live with the scars, the memory, the heartbreak, the unanswered questions of the events of 38 years ago? Is it possible?
Very good question, Joe. And the answer to this question is a very simplistic yes. And I say simplistic because you hear the adage that says time heals all wounds. And this is a saying that is not rooted in science. It is rooted in a myth. There is no question that there are things that have happened in our lives for which, if we allow time to move on, will give us a different perspective, will cause us to rethink the approach or the answer that we might have given in the spur at the moment the thing is happening. And then years later, as time rolls on, we have a different perspective and we no longer need to or want to address it. However, when we talk about emotional scars and trauma, which really October 19th and 25th which is soon coming up again. Those two dates are etched in the memory of not just Grenadians, not just people who were present in country. In fact, Joe, when this was happening, I was nestled in the safety of Maracas Valley in Trinidad. I was in college, October 19th. I had just left. I left on September 19th to do my undergrad, and we had the occurrence on October 19th, and what ensued with between 19th and 25th, I missed all of that, okay? But nonetheless, when you think of the loss of lives of people with whom you were familiar, when you think of your villagers being incarcerated and people with whom you grew up, it does bring back a certain kind of memory. So let me say this, that the events of October 19th, and in fact, it's not just a day or 2 days, it's a period between 19th and 25th, and a few days later, will continue to linger with people, whether you experienced it or whether you listen to the news. The experience will linger, the trauma, the scars, as you rightly put it, will linger with us way beyond 38 years. In fact, it will not die with a generation, because there are too many unanswered questions. Every time we visit, watch this, Joe, every time we visit the fort and we look at the holes in the walls and we see pictures, and we listen to a speech from Morris or any one of the revolutionary leaders, or we look at a book, we look at history, it is going to bring back those memories. And so the answer is a simplistic yes, but it is far-reaching, the effects of 38 years ago.
The effects that we suffered, Doc, is it worsened or is it exacerbated given the fact that we are so closely knit as a people? 133 square miles. We literally could go around Grenada in whoops and we're back. Is it those constant reminders that you pointed to that makes it even more so difficult? Would you believe that some people, they may possibly want to let go, but whenever you go to the town of St. George, you see the fort. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
You go to the fort, you see the bullet holes. You walk and you see and you hear of somebody who takes you right back. But tell me, Doc, what happens in one's head, first and foremost, when they go through a traumatic experience? What happens to the body? What happens?
And this is probably the way we want to take it this morning. We want to deal with the emotional and psychological scars, and how do we deal with it? And I dare say we are not going to attempt to put an end to or provide solution for people who are still dealing with the trauma, because what we know about trauma is that trauma is followed by a period of grieving, and grieving is not necessarily a time sensitive issue. People grieve at their own pace and their own timing and in their own sphere. As a result, what you may get over and move on in life from, I may still be struggling with it, okay? And it has to do with a lot of things like resiliency, coping skills, ego strength, etc., etc. But let's go back to the original question now. It's like, how does this happen? So let me say this here. Every traumatic experience has an emotional scar. So that bottom line, you can quote me on that. Every traumatic experience leaves an emotional scar. Now, for some, the scar is really big, and for others, it is less visible, but there is a scar. And very often, when we have extreme traumatic experience, especially when it has to do with the loss of lives, okay, Joe? And we had a lot of people losing their lives between 19th and 25th of October. Remember that? A lot of people that we know. You talk about the smallness and the uniqueness of Grenada. We're small, 133 square miles, 110,000 people. We know almost everybody who knows somebody, right? So we're family. So we're just a communal population in Grenada. So here's what happens when you experience a traumatic event. Very often, it leads to what we call in the field of psychology, post-traumatic stress, PTSD. You hear that, right? And post-traumatic stress disorder comes as a result of a posed threat for the safety, for the life of the people who are involved and or who witness or who later on learn about it. So there is something called vicarious trauma. That is, even though, Joe, I was in Trinidad during the period 19th to the 25th of October, 1983, I had family members, I had friends who lost their lives, acquaintances. So I am living my trauma through the knowledge that I knew them. So that's what we call vicarious trauma. Now, those who experienced it directly have a similar response. Now, for example, like 911, you and I weren't in 911. We saw it on TV, but we are petrified every time we took a plane, and we were scared, okay? Because we were wondering, is it the last day? That's what PTSD looks like and feels like. Whenever someone loses their life or there is a perceived danger, we go into this. And there are 4 things I want us to quickly talk about, because we probably will resort to it again. And that is what happens when people are diagnosed with or they are experiencing post-traumatic stress. One, Joe, they experience what we call flashbacks, okay? Flashbacks of the event, flashbacks of the story. And sometimes these flashbacks, they appear in dreams or in nightmares. So you may wake up with, trembling and shaking, sweating, because there is something that just snaps at you in your sleep. In addition to flashbacks, we have what is called intrusive thoughts, and we're talking about PTSD. What is intrusive thought? Intrusive thought is, Joe, you just might be walking down the street and intuitively something pops in your head, or you might be listening to radio and a song comes on that reminds you of October 19th or October 25th or 23rd, whichever day the trauma you are experiencing happened in your life. So it's called intrusive thought. You are not thinking deliberately about it, but it appears and it stays with you. It may cause you to experience a heightened sense of alertness. Maybe your heart might be racing. You might become teary-eyed. You might become even angry, Joe, because there are many, and then that's one of the things that we're going to talk about too. Trauma.
But let me ask you, Doc. But let me just interject here, because you hear we've talked about there's the notion that time heals all things. And I've heard occasions, not necessarily, when people go through traumatic events, they say, I have tried my best to forget about it. I was not even thinking about it. I threw it in the back of my mind. But I know inside there's something that's referred to as trigger. Let's talk about those potential as we hear. The trigger. How difficult, how can I manage those trigger? And each and every one of us, not even in necessarily traumatic experiences, each and every one of us, we experience triggers that has a different emotional reaction. I'm assuming that the reality is the trigger, the effects it has on one person, it may have a completely different effect on somebody else. And isn't that what makes dealing with all of this collectively so difficult?
Absolutely. We have these triggers, whether they are traumatic triggers or experiences or fun memories. I want to also interject, Joe, that when we talk about triggers, there are triggers for fun memories. So you may see somebody just sitting on the bus or sitting at the desk, and then they just bust out with a broad smile because they have been triggered by a very, very fun experience, and so they're remembering it. And that's what happens with traumatic experience too. You may smell. There might be something to do with your sense of smell, your sense of taste, your sense of hearing, even the sense of feeling. You may see someone who has or was associated with a particular episode of your trauma, whether it was a friend in the PRA or the PRG or wherever it is. And that might trigger you to a response. So very, very good question. So we talk about the flashbacks that happens. We talk about the intrusive thoughts that happen. And then there is another one called hypervigilance. What is hypervigilance, Joe? Hypervigilance is a state of where the person who has not yet resolved the trauma is always on edge. That's what the meaning means. It's like they're on pins and needles and they're waiting for something to happen. And there are people who are like that. They see an army uniform. Watch this, Joe. An army uniform or a military vehicle, just a green vehicle. They become tense. They start sweating. Their hearts start racing. Their pupils dilate. They are telling the endocrine system is sending a message to the adrenal gland to produce cortisol and adrenaline because we need to run. Hey, it's 38 years ago, you may say, but when someone sees a vehicle who has been traumatized by the military, okay, and they see a green vehicle or they hear a gunshot, their bodies go into the state of hypervigilance and they're relieving all of the trauma from 38 years ago, from 50 years ago.
Reliving the trauma of 38 years ago. That's the conversation this morning. And my guest this morning is Dr. Augustine Pancho. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And we want to encourage you that's listening. Feel free if you have a direct question. Today's program, as we said, is all about healing, offering a measure of answering the questions. How do I deal with the trauma of the past? The intention is to move on, not necessarily to rehash any feelings of the past. I see that there's a caller on the line. I'm going to answer you and lock you into the system, but we do have to take a quick commercial break, Mikey, really quick one, and then we'll be right back.
Let's get tough on breed your larceny. It will destroy our economy. Larceny threatens our food security. Can hurt us locally, hurt us globally. To all the buyers, ask for license from all produce sellers. To all people, 300 for police for them thieving fellas. To all the farmers, please don't steal produce from your brother. Then you sell it to traffickers, hotels and street vendors. Nah, man. Let's do all we can to stop radio larceny. New vigilance, new laws, and a tough judiciary. Stop Grenada's organized business crime. It's time.
To report pre-deal larceny, call 300.
to the point. Again, we say thanks to our listeners and our viewers. We have a caller that is live and waiting on the line. Dr. Pancho, good morning, caller. You're live. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Mr. Joseph.
Hello, sir.
I'm quite impressed by what Dr. Pancho is discussing. But he's not going back into the nonsense and the mess. But I believe it's a pity that GBN cannot get people in company with Dr. Pancho, people like Chester Humphrey, people like Peter David, people like Ewart Lane, to come, sit, and speak to Grenadian people to help them to understand the nature of the situation that took place so many years ago. Because the darkness that Grenadians still live in is just too dark for the mind to comprehend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Doc, this call is talking about the darkness, that vacuum, that questions yet to be answered.
Yeah.
And it is you having to live with it. How would you respond to him?
Well, the caller Joe does make a very valid point. When we deal with trauma, the extent to which the trauma lingers is hinged on many things. Okay, it hinges on a person's resiliency, skills, their ego strength. It hinges on the kind of support that they get, but it also hinges on the awareness and the currency of the knowledge. And there are so many things, and I think that's where the caller is absolutely right. There are so many unknown about the death, about the whole thing that's around October 19th. And the arrest of the leader and the execution style of how they lost their life. There are so many unanswered questions. And Grenadians, we believe, many of us do believe, that there are people who have many of the answers. They may not have all the answers, but at least they have some answers. And I think that's what the caller is alluding to. If we could get some of these people to talk. And I am not so sure that they haven't in some capacity, but I understand the caller's plight. And yes, you're right, sir. The more we know is the less anxious we are. The more we know, the less fearful we are. The more we know is the more we can participate and heal. Absolutely correct.
Do you think it would have been easier for us individualistically and even as a nation? And yes, I know there have been attempts in the past to bring healing and closure. I know it came years after. Do you think that maybe the pain would have been easier to deal with had it been addressed in the immediate years following the revolution, when the memories were still yet fresh and people were able to deal with the raw emotions instead of opted to bury them into the abyss of forgetfulness?
Yeah. And that's a very good segue, a very good point, because, we had the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. We have had several clergymen seeking to pray and to bring healing about it. But watch this, Joe. A very significant thing about history, traumatic history, whether you study world history or West Indian history, when you look at all the wars that have been fought, and the War of Independence and the war, whatever it is that have been fought, whether it's Haiti, the Caribbean, the United States, England, France, wherever these wars have been fought, the history and the trauma lingers because people write about it. It's intended to play out in history for eternity. So it is possible that what is happening in Grenada, there might be people in our generation or in our generation who were children, young.
when you pass in that dark, I have a caller.
Yes, someone tried to call
I
me.
realize that. I recognize it. That's fine. So I was just going to help you by just engaging this caller that is waiting on the line. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning.
Dr. Pancho, do you think that a few of us experience different things and we do not learn, we do not change them? Explain. What may stress out one brings joy to others? And I would like you to explain that if you could. Explain that to me or to the people. All right, thanks.
Different persons being exposed to the same stimuli or stimulus, but having varied responses to it. What causes that? That's the essence of the caller's question.
Right, and that's a very good question. That's a very strong psychological question, because what happens is that there is a nice saying. What is joke for school children is death for crap.
Death for crap.
Now that is an adage that relates to exactly what the caller is saying. What hurts you may not hurt me in the same way. And this is because of the way we are built. Each of us, we are built separately with different, what we call temperament, different coping skills. Some of us can cope much better than others. Other people some people are fragile. Their ego is fragile, their temperament is fragile. And as such, what may hurt you or hurt you in certain ways may not faze me whatsoever. So it has to do with the way we were built, the way we were created, also the resiliency skills. Some of the things that I have experienced in life, Joe, may not faze me anymore, but it may faze you because you have not had those experiences yet.
Certainly, Doc, would agree that our experiences and our response to a stimuli or stimulus, it's based on, you said, the environment that we grew up in, past experiences, as well as our ideology. And it may just be possible because yesterday, Tuesday, I was speaking with Dr. Terence Maricho, and we were highlighting the fact that there were the ideological differences that brought the demise of the revolution had nothing to do with the masses.
Yeah,
they were the ideological differences within the party. The masses were on a different plane altogether. And do you think that while you may not have heard from some of the leaders, those who were deeply ingrained in it, who had their own experiences, but the masses were left literally totally unaware of why this happened, never saw it coming, and as such, it has become even more difficult to understand why could such a thing, so good, have gone catastrophically so wrong in such a quick space of time?
Yeah, and Joe, thank you. Bless Dr. Maricho. That's my good buddy. I haven't seen him or talked to him in a little while, but he is dead on target because and that's probably part of the whole definition of PTSD and how it is when the trauma that has happened is sudden. Okay, so, Joy, it's like in your home. You think everything is good, and I'm not preempting anything, but a catastrophe happens, and it happens as though it's overnight. You become overwhelmed because you have no preparation skills. You have not done anything to prepare for. And think of it. Members with whom you sat and ate and drank and drove and flew. You are all of a sudden you're under the gun, the barrel of a gun, being threatened, and not only threatened, but lose your life. How does that happen? That makes for a good episode of traumatic experience, and that's what trauma is. That's partly what trauma is.
We have a caller that is live on the line. Good morning, caller. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes. Could you laugh at trauma? I'll explain what I mean. If someone tried to kill you and they were unsuccessful, could you laugh at that situation? Thank you very much.
I'm happy you the one that had to answer that one. Could you laugh at a traumatic experience?
Joe, we have responses. You know, people cry at good news. Right. You graduate and you get your doctorate or your bachelor's. It doesn't matter what degree. Graduation is a joyous, festive time, and you cry. You cry at weddings. You're getting married to the love of your life. You cry. You know, and so what happens to crying? Crying is not just an expression, an emotional expression for sadness. It is also an emotional expression for joy. And so what happens is that maybe you laugh because you are sad. Watch this. You know, people say, "Oh, how can you laugh because you're sad?" Yeah, because the body and the mind, they do not know how to handle appropriately what we think is appropriate. So we think at funerals we're supposed to cry, and if you don't cry, then you shouldn't laugh. Well, if you have a traumatic experience, you're supposed to be sad, petrified, maybe somber, you know, and you laugh. So it is kind of out of the ordinary, but it is not uncommon for people to laugh at dangerous situations.
Can we assert that the laughter that we see is really and truly that confusion that's happening internally, that the mind is not able to decipher? Could it be a mix of the overwhelmingness of the situation, but yet me still being grateful that I've survived this? So one, I'm like, boy, I almost lost my life, and you sadden. But then gratitude kicks in and says, boy, you know what? It could have been worse. I survived this. Let me laugh and take it in stride. Could it be a collage, a mix of those two emotions, as you're hinting there?
Well, there is no question that trauma and traumatic experiences bring what is called confusion, because we're not wired. The human mind is not wired for adversity. You know, we're wired for joy and safety and security. Absolutely. You know, from the moment we are brought up, we came into the world. If you study developmental psychology, we are wired for safety and security. Watch this. Let me show you what that. When the baby cries, Joe, what do we do as parents? We take the baby up, right? We check, is the pampers wet? Are they hungry? We feed them, we bathe them, we powder them, and then we soothe them and we put them to sleep. And they grow up in a world of safety. Okay? So babies actually, they thrive best in a world of safety. Our brains are wired for that. When we cry, what we do, we hold the baby and we shake the baby, we coo to the baby, we talk nonsense, gibberish, to make them feel happy. And guess what? We are wired that way. So when we become adults, we're wired to think that the world is a safe place. We trust people. And then trauma comes, and trauma messes it up for us because we have not been socialized to accept trauma. Okay? And when it comes, it confuses the wiring of the brain. And so sometimes we could laugh, because we do not understand the impending danger.
Dealing, Doc, with PTSD, it varies, as with everything else in life, which hinges on our past experiences, how we may choose to. You may do something wrong to me. It may take me. For me personally, I tend not to hold on to things, so I deal with it in immediate. Dealing with trauma, there are different ways, and I want us to explore. One of the avenues of dealing with trauma, some say, is by getting involved with the survivors, facing either the person that inflicted that trauma to you, and also socializing with other individuals who have been through a similar experience.
Joe, remember earlier in our conversation, I started to talk about the signs and symptoms, and I'm coming to your question, of PTSD. And I talk about the flashbacks. I talked about intrusive thoughts. I talk about hypervigilance. The fourth one, which is a telltale group of symptoms for diagnosing post-traumatic stress, is what we call avoidance. And that is going to lead me to answering your question. Avoidance. A lot of people choose as they to go around a certain roundabout because in there is a reminder of Mount Weldale. No, you understand? Coming down Lucas Street.
Right.
They may never want to go there again because the trauma is too much and they are overwhelmed. So they avoid it. They avoid the physical environment. Secondly, they avoid talking about it because talking creates a new wave of body response and psychological response. And so you ask, so that leads us now to how do we deal with and what, how expressing the freedom to express is one of the ways that we can heal or that we can deal with trauma. Talking about it and be willing, Joe, watch this. And that one is a hard one. When you talk to people in therapy, whether it's treatment, to bringing them to the point of letting go. And not letting go because, I want peace, but letting go because we have come to the conclusion of the grieving process, where for your own emotional health, it is probably the best thing to do is to let go. Let me take you back to something very common and simple, a breakup or maybe a divorce. You may have invested a lot in another person and there is a dissolution in the relationship. There comes a time for your own emotional health. We want you to come to the point where you can breathe and accept it as part of life. See, remember I told you how we are wired as children for safety and security and joy and purpose. And when traumatic experience happens, it stays longer with us because we have to deal with it for a long time. And so we teach people how to let go and come to what we call acceptance of certain things in life. Now, for some, it takes more than 38 years. For others, there are many, many people who have already gone past this and talking about it, going to St. George's, visiting the fort, that does nothing to trigger them anymore. Bless their soul, they have been. I have one gentleman, and incidentally, Joe, the person who called me just now is one person from Tivoli. I will not call his name, who every time he writes on Facebook, if you follow him, you will see, he always suggests in his, and especially during this period now, you will see his writing filled with the truth. This young man suffered as a teenager, shot, incarcerated, hospitalized, almost lost his life, lost, some of his hands, his fingers are deformed now because he was shot by an AK, okay? Incarcerated young man, nothing, right? Didn't do anything to deserve that. And so he has a story to tell. And so he makes a lot of aspersions about some of the political leaders, even members of parliament currently, and people who currently or have been in leadership position in Grenada. He makes aspersions against them because why? He is looking for an avenue to express. Because, and I don't even know if he understands the psychology of the state in which he is.
Wow.
Because he's constantly, and I'm going to give you his name so you could read his writing, because it's not a secret about his writing. But when you read it, he's all about the truth, getting the truth, telling the truth, being honest about it. And you know what? If someone like him, gets to a point where somebody tells him the truth, he gets awareness, I am sure that he is going to have a better healing. But right now he's hurting. And he's an adult like us.
Wow. But let me ask you, Doc, as important as you said it, and something triggered. Within the current construct of what's happening, you hear the constant conversation, whenever you probably have disputes between governments and the trade unionists and these different things, you hear about this constant distrust to the masses and government. Is this in any way, because a lot of us, we still have a longing for the truth, to know why you did this, who did it, and whenever it is because you see something that seems to look like, you know what, he's not telling me the truth, he's lying to me, and similar to the gentleman you spoke with, it gives rise to that feeling on the inside. And could that be all part of maybe what, why we're not conscious of it, while maybe as Grenadians we react the way we react to politicians, given that it is interesting that some of the very same individuals who are the center of the PIG period and some of the very same individuals that sit within our parliament, is at the seat of power, and we have to still take directives from them. In our subliminal minds, unconsciously, we're still thinking, boy, they did it to us back then. Maybe one day they may just do it again. Don't trust them at all.
I saw a writing recently that casts aspersion or casts a little finger at a certain political party that had quite a number of members from that regime, the PRG regime, and exactly what the person or persons were writing about on Facebook. You know, how can we trust them? Because they have so many answers for us, for which they are withholding. And I'm not so sure that they have many answers. I think they do have some, but I think many things were kept away from certain people. You know, that was the surprise of everything that happened. But Joe, you are absolutely right. When we have knowledge, we have power. When we have knowledge, we fear less, we question less, we trust more. You know, I don't know if you're a parent, probably you are, but parents always tell children, if you tell me the truth, right? That's what we do.
Oh yes, tell me the truth. And you don't have to worry about the consequences. It is going to be okay.
So let's worry about the consequence. Because why? Parents figure that if you can tell me the truth, and children who, when they tell the truth, receive sympathy and empathy for the rash decisions that they make, they develop better relationships with their parents than children who, when they tell the truth, they get punished. Because what happens consequently is that if I tell the truth, you beat me, then I'm going to lie. Right? That's the psychology about truth and trust. And so I believe that if people are more forthwith, people who have a lot more information than they're telling us, we are going to be more trusting, and we are going to be dealing with this traumatic experience of October much better.
Dealing with the traumatic experiences of the experience of 38 years ago, it's a question that remains constant in our minds. 15 minutes onto the hour, we'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back on To The Point.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
We return to the point, and we go straight to the telephone lines. My guest is clinical psychologist Dr. Augustine Pancho. Caller, you live?
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
I just wanted to share a little experience with what the doctor is saying, right? A couple of years ago, a couple always two, but let's say within 3 years, someone came into my house within within 7 days. No ways broke open to, no lock or thing, but they came in and they steal. So it happened twice. Then we get scared the second time, right? We went to the police, explained to the police. Then the police asked us if we suspect anyone. Yeah, we said yes, we suspect there's some guys living over where we live, and they're always looking. So then they said, do you all know who is these guys? We said no. The police said, these are bandit, criminal, and batty men, these guys. And the one that we are explaining there, he's very dangerous because they was taking them from the police station one day to the court. And you see like how they just have them men sit at the side in the back of the van and have them on the handcuff and the police on the side. He said one kick a police out of the van. So they said these men are dangerous. So the police came, they take all kind of things, and then when they leave, they tell us to batten down because these guys, you can't take chance. So we were so scared of this thing. So that was a Friday evening. So when the police leave, they leave about after 6 o'clock. So the house have 4 doors. Within 1, 2 days, 3 days, there was 17 locks on these doors with sit out within the floor because we are so scared. Sometimes we're in the back window in the kitchen and we're watching to see if they're watching because one of these guys came and threw a stone on the house. And when my lady looked out, they waved a knife for her. So, and they were monitoring us all the time. So
okay.
That had us, it's so traumatizing for months. You're scared, and that is one of the worst experiences you could ever have with someone go inside your house like a thief.
Invading your privacy. Paranoia steps in, Doc.
Yeah. And you notice that he has talked about quite a few of the cluster of symptoms, hypervigilance, always on the P's and Q's. That's one. Intrusive thought, if you just the weapon, it brings you back right there to the feeling that you are overwhelmed. But that's what trauma, that's how trauma is measured. Trauma is measured by the extent to which you feel threatened on your person or your life, impending danger that is sudden and that the mind is really not prepared for. My empathy goes out with this family for having to endure this ordeal because we're meant to be safe. Joe, we're not meant to lock up our doors and windows, We're supposed to live, feel free, to forget your wallet somewhere and your cell phone somewhere and to come back and get it. This is how the mind is wired. And when it doesn't happen like that, it puts us in a tailspin and we get traumatized by all this dangerous stuff.
being traumatized by events seen, unseen, and I'm assuming, Doc, it adding to the anguish is that because a lot is not known, people then they recount the events in their own mind. A gentleman wrote about, he said he was asking, what about the deaths that took place in St. Patrick, not just those on the fort? And conversation starts on, okay, what deaths in St. Patrick? And all of a sudden, that again can serve as a Pandora's box all by itself. Revelations being things being brought to the fore that you never, while you're trying to heal, things being brought to the fore that you never actually knew was part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I remember vividly because I was a mere teenager, Joe. Maybe you were not born yet, but I actually went to see the bodies in St. Patrick's in Plains in Montreach. There was one right there in Belmont in Tivoli that we saw the legs being blown, the flesh. I vividly remember the leg with the boot on, just all over the place, and all the body parts just because being bombed up. You remember that? Those of us who were at Queen's Park and not only Loris, you remember these people. In fact, if I worked with Loris, so these are the things that keep us and keep trauma going. And when we have no answers, Joe, it lingers. It lingers, and it may linger for an eternity.
It may linger for eternity. Only one good thing, Doc. You said a while ago, I may not have been born yet. Thank you for making me feel as though I'm 16. I've always needed that. I keep thinking I'm old, but you just made me feel as though I said, Doc actually said that. I wasn't wrong. Okay, that's okay. I'll just accept my age to be, let's say, maybe 32. I'll take that. Doc, we're running out of time, and this is for certainly is a conversation that needs to be ongoing. Let's just take and allow me the next couple of minutes to speak to the Grenadian public. Before we do that, though, there's a caller, and I probably see no harm in us engaging that person possibly as the final caller. Caller, good morning. You're live.
That revolution. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying that would happen to me. But if it happens to me that somebody or some set of people came into my home, I'll be more prepared. And perhaps, I don't know if I would be more relaxed, but I would be more prepared. Bear in mind, I would be prepared. So sometimes a person who comes to me or in my home or who comes to attack me, I might likely to defeat them because they feel I'm not prepared. So tell me about preparation when you have experience then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Doc, 5 minutes on to the hour. Literally, we should be wrapping. But I'm giving just the next few minutes. How do we deal with this, honestly? Just offer some timely, wholesome tips to individuals, not necessarily on that is specific to the events of 38 years ago, but individuals in a whole. In recent times, we've been talking about the mental health and all of this. It muddles everything, because you know what? We can't deal with the events of back then, but here we have all these other issues to deal with. How do I keep it right in my head, dealing with all of these emotional juggernauts?
Thank you, and that's a good way to end today. And remember, the month of October, the entire month, is dedicated to mental health. So what we're doing today, talking about PTSD and the trauma, it fits right into the theme for the month of October, which is Mental Health Month. The month of the child, the month of the elderly, all of that playing right here. Joe, one of the things that I encourage people to do who have suffered traumatic experiences, whether it is current and or past, whether it's childhood, is to talk about it. So look for a trusted professional to talk with, expressing. You know that we hold back, we deny certain things, experiences that have happened to us, and the best way to deal with it is to express it, because the more we take in, Joe, and we do not let out, there is going to be an explosion one of these days, and it may be an explosion that may hurt self or others. So let's express, learn to express. Secondly, look for a professional, express. Thirdly, Joe, create opportunities for ourselves to be engaged in positive things. You understand? It is called diversion. Diversionary tactics is really good, a good practice for our mental health. Look for things that we enjoy. Look for things and to do. Create a hobby. Get out of the regurgitation of the traumatic experience as best as we could. Now, we have to deal with it. There is no question about it. And Joe, when all else failed, Joe, I want to submit this morning on national radio and TV to look for a power that is greater and bigger than us, Joe. I want to end by that today. I believe that there is someone who looks out for us far more than we can look out for ourselves. And that is a power that is undeniable in the life of Grenadians and the life of everyone, and certainly us, and tap into the source and the power of this great being. We call him God. Some of us call him Yahweh, and other people choose all kinds of different names. But I say pray, Joe, and hopefully we find strength to deal with our trauma.
Thank you, Dr. Augustine Pancho, clinical psychologist. After all is said and done, you pray it moves mountains and helps us to deal with some of the dark moments in our lives. 2 minutes onto the hour of 10 o'clock in the morning time. This is where I say thanks for being part of the broadcast. We continue. I want to encourage you as you go through the next couple of days. Monday, the 25th, it is a holiday, but certainly as you go through the period, allow it to be a time of reflection, a time of healing, a time where you seek answers, accept some of the realities of our lives, and of course, as you said, with gratitude, you accept the trauma of the past, you allow it, of course, to heal for today, and you look forward for the glorious opportunities that comes tomorrow. So long, everybody. JC loves you. I'm out of here until we do this all over again tomorrow. Thanks for being part of BL to the Point. I will join you tomorrow when we do this all over again from 6 in the morning.